I worked just shy of 40 years, but my pension still wasn't going to be enough for us. So when he called out of the blue, offering a free pension review, I was all ears. He spoke professionally about investments. He seemed a really decent guy. Just shy of 40 years pension. He took all of it.
In England and Wales, London voted Remain by 76%. On the other hand, places like South Wales, the northeast of England, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, large parts of the West Midlands, they voted Leave by an equally lopsided margin. And that is now the political division in the country, because those votes for Brexit reflected very different political positions with regard to this contemporary issue of identity. And what the Conservative Party chose to do when it made Boris Johnson its leader was to put itself very firmly on one side of this new divide, the nationalist side, if you will, as opposed to the globalist cosmopolitan one. And what this has resulted in is that the Conservative Party has just abandoned its commitment to free markets in the way that it had it before. It's not a socialist party, but it's definitely not a Thatcherite free market party in the way that it was even a few years ago under, say, David Cameron. And so the Labour Party is now left rather baffled because the Chancellor is talking, tomorrow, he's going to put up business taxes in order to deal and to fund a major program of state investment in green technology. Now, at this point, people are thinking, my God, what is happening here? The Conservative Party's suddenly become, we're in a bizarro world where the Tory party has become something that it's been totally against. This should not surprise you. This is what the Tory party has done several times in its history. The Tory party is the most successful political party in any democratic country, unless you possibly count the Liberal Democrats in Japan. Apart from them, no party has such a record of sustained success over such a long period. How do they do this? Well, they're like Doctor Who. If you see Doctor Who, every so often, the Doctor undergoes a regeneration and he comes out looking completely different, maybe even his gender changes in the last one, and he's got a totally different demeanour and so on. And yet somehow, he's still the Doctor. Yeah. Now, that's what the Tory party is like. Every so often, it undergoes a radical change. It goes from being a protectionist party to a free trade party, and then it suddenly goes back to being a protectionist party again. It suddenly goes from being a party of laissez-faire to being a party of a certain kind of state intervention, and then it goes back again. It just does whatever it takes to win elections, because that's the basic goal. The basic goal is to preserve the status quo by being in power, partly in order to keep the other lot out, and also to maintain a monopoly position on one side of politics. And so that's what the Tory party has done. And so what we're seeing at the moment is that those divisions of Brexit are still very much there. That's why the Conservatives won a ton of seats in the north of England at the last election, many of which had never voted Conservative in their entire existence until this last election, because we've seen this realignment around this new issue of identity. And so it's going to persist.
That's the best possible analogy I could have ever heard for that scenario, because it really is almost like the Tory party is an entity of itself that's fighting for survival more than anything else. Like it adjusts what it needs to do in order to continue existing. And it's extremely good at that. If you as an historian can see this, do you think then that if other people see this, that they'll realize this and then realize, okay, you're not really fighting necessarily for what we believe in or what we care about, even though they're addressing the issue that's the most popular at the moment. But they could perhaps turn against that almost want to say the turncoat scenario.
Yeah, some will, absolutely. I mean, the point is this: the people at the top of the Conservative Party, I think, made a pretty conscious decision when they chose Boris Johnson to be their leader and PM, that they were going to run the risk of losing a significant number of middle-class professional voters in the southeast of England, who were broadly on one side of the new divide, in order to get a certain number of older working class voters in other parts of England who were on the other side. Now, as it happened, they had a Goldilocks outcome. They got all those new working class voters in the north of England, but they didn't lose that many of their middle class professional voters in the southeast because of Jeremy Corbyn, basically. If the Labour Party had had any other leader, they probably would have lost about 20 or 30 seats in the southeast. So they would still have won a majority, but it would have been a smaller majority. But because it was Corbyn, those middle-class people who really didn't like Leave and who didn't like Boris Johnson still voted Conservative because they just couldn't tolerate the idea of Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister or anything like it, near it rather. So in the future, I think, yes, they will. I think what will happen going forward, once the Labour Party gets its act together, is that the Conservative Party will become an increasingly plebeian party, working class party, and it will gain support in the north of England and continue to be the dominant party in the rural parts of the country, but it will lose a lot of suburban voters in the southeast and in London. It's been going backwards in London for about 10 years anyway. Now, this is the pattern you see in the United States as well. What